Since June, more data has become available. The economy now is expected to contract by 7.8% this year. And the 2021 outlook is more uncertain. Job losses have been particularly severe. But we cannot allow ourselves to fall into a season of despair, despite the challenges of the pandemic. We cannot allow ourselves to move towards a sovereign debt crisis. We have it within our power to reverse this pathway. Therefore, today, government sets out an active set of measures to avoid a sovereign debt crisis. We table a 5-year fiscal consolidation pathway that promotes economic growth while bringing debt under control. Our revised fiscal framework puts us on a course to stabilize the debt to GDP ratio at around 95% rather, within the next 5 years. Very close to 100% of GDP. So the risks are higher. Therefore, there cannot be any slippage on the fiscus. There's no room for slippage. The stock of gross debt will rise from roughly 4 trillion this year to 5.5 trillion in 23-24. The medium-term fiscal strategy narrows the main budget primary deficit from an expected 266 billion rand in 21-22 to 84 billion rand in 23-24, and will achieve a surplus by 25-26. Infrastructure and structural reforms are at the center of the recovery plan. Mr. President, our government, under your wise leadership, has championed the infrastructure fund to implementation, and we are starting to see the results. Subsidies of 2.2 billion will support the social housing program aimed at poor working South Africans. A further 6.7 billion has been contractually committed to this program, and we expect the total investment amount from this program to be around 20 billion over the next 10 years. In April this year, government announced a major fiscal relief package of around 500 billion rand, or 10% of GDP, including, there's a reason why I'm doing this, to answer the question, where has the 500 billion rand gone? So one, more than 30 billion for health and other frontline services. 2, support for vulnerable households, which is now in excess of 50 billion rand. 3, more than 40 billion rand for wage protection through the Unemployment Insurance Fund. 4, around 100 billion for job creation initiatives, which will now be spread over the MTEF. 5, 200 billion rand for a credit guarantee scheme, a scheme involving the National Treasury, South African Reserve Bank, and the banking sector. 6, 20 billion rand towards municipalities to assist them with COVID-19 related activities. 7, 70 billion rand towards emergency tax measures. The government has decided to extend the social relief of distress grant to the end of January 2021. Because this grant is very effective in reaching the unemployed, we propose to redirect 6.8 billion rand from the public employment program towards this relief of distress. The temporary increases, unfortunately, for the top up of the grants will have to come to an end, unfortunately. These adjustments appropriation also adds 1 billion rand for food relief to fight hunger. Right now, government is borrowing at a rate of 2.1 billion rand per day. Madam Speaker, this cannot continue. We must be careful to avoid the fate of countries such as Argentina and Ecuador that have defaulted on their debt this year. We face this question all the time. Why don't we spend our way out of the present crisis? What's wrong with you people in the National Treasury? Why don't you spend your way out of this crisis? Well, certainly in 2009, when we had debt of 31.5% of GDP, and the real yield on government debt was about 3%. Every rand of government spent got us 1 rand and 60 cents in GDP. So 1 rand spent in GDP terms, 1 rand 60. It's in 2009. Now, however, at such elevated real interest rates, every additional rand gets less than a rand in GDP. So the situation has changed. As John Maynard Keynes said, when the situation changes, I change my mind. Don't you, sir? You have to change your mind. Otherwise, you suffer from what we call an oogklappie approach. Irrespective of the situation, you just keep moving. Even when there's a flood in front of you, just keep going into the water. So it means we're actually far more poorer than we thought we were. And it is easy to see why. As we borrow more, we pay even more in debt servicing costs. We have also not been spending sufficiently on infrastructure, which is important in long-term economic growth. Amongst other things, we will, one, make it easy to do business. We must remove the needlessly complex red tape that increases the cost of doing business. 2, we must create a stable and predictable set of policies. As we rebuild, there must be universal understanding of the policy trajectory of our government. It is not only investors that need confidence, but also every person needs confidence. As a farmer, I plant because I know in 7 years' time I'm going to reap what I planted. I want to see those avocados in 7 years. I need to have the confidence to plant today because I won't reap tomorrow. I will harvest in 7 years' time. But I need the policy certainty in this regard. 3, we must use our ingenuity and adapt after the ravages of the pandemic. We must be creative. Not everything is going to come from the government, but it has to be a combination of government, private enterprise, private individuals, small and medium enterprises coming together, with the banking sector coming in to provide the lubricants for the economy to function. 4, we must embrace a sustainable future and work towards a green and just transition. 3 billion rand was allocated to the Land Bank in June. The bank will require an additional 7 billion rand over the medium term to support its restructuring and refocus. R2.1 billion is allocated to SAA to implement its business rescue plan. Well, let me repeat. 10.5 billion rand is allocated to SAA to to implement its business rescue plan. This allocation is funded through reductions to the baselines of national departments, public entities, and conditional grants. This allocation is in addition to the 16.4 billion rand allocated over the 2020 MTF in the February budget for settling guaranteed debt and interest. You can't run away from your obligations. You can't run away from your obligations. You can't run away from your obligations.